I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Well, we're back to our regular format. We're going to go ahead and hit some questions here, and we're going to try to get through this as quickly as possible because we've got quite a few questions today. Our first question, 51 DSS on YouTube asks, in the discussion about blinking, you mentioned how you were focused on the target. I'd like to see a vid on that fundamental technique. Focus on the target and not on the reticle. I recently learned this rule as a novice rifleman. I often forget and it looks like my target's moving all over the place. For rifle shooting beyond 50 yards, I would suggest a spotting scope is a high priority in the range bag. Can find a very serviceable spotting scope for less than $150. And in a similar question on sniper's hide, DCR asks, when utilizing iron sights, you focus your eyesight on the front sight. With a red dot, you look at the point on the target you want to hit. When using a scope, do I look at the target or the reticle? Well, when I was doing the discussion about blinking on our last episode, I kind of misspoke. When I said focus on the target, what I was really meaning is focus on the sight picture. When you are using iron sights, front sight focus is paramount. You want to make sure you see the clear front sight tip superimposed over your target. Your target will be a little bit blurry. With optically sighted systems with a rifle scope, you want to do something similar. I like to focus intently on the clear center of the reticle. The reason being, if you have your scope set up correctly, then the reticle is going to be clear in most conditions to your eyesight. If you're shooting long range, you start to get mirage and different issues with the atmosphere, some haze, that kind of thing in there. Your target will rarely ever be in sharp focus. It'll usually be just a little bit fuzzy to incredibly out of focus if you've got some serious mirage kicking up. With side focus scopes, you can dial a little bit of that in, but sometimes the parallax and the focus are not perfect, and you're just not going to be able to get a parallax-free, clear picture of your target. So in that case, you want to focus on the reticle, make sure it's clear and sharp and exactly where you want it on the target when you press that trigger. Now, as far as the question on spotting scopes, I have never seen a spotting scope for $150 that I would consider serviceable. The $150 range, they are generally trash, and if you look at them through any amount of time, your eyes really start to get bleary. They really get tired quickly. Spotting scopes in that price range, they may look okay at the bottom of their magnification range, but as you dial them up towards the top, they really look horrible. If you compare them to any of the mid-range to top-end spotting scopes, you quickly see where they fall apart. So I would not suggest wasting $150 on a spotting scope. I would put that money back into your primary rifle scope. In fact, I recently sold the only spotting scope that I had because I found that very often I could do the job just as well with a high-end scope on my rifle. I'm now getting to the point where I'm going to end up buying another spotting scope. However, the reason I want another spotting scope is partially to be able to set up a camera on the to set up a camera on the ocular lens of the scope to capture trace and capture impacts downrange, but also to be able to spot from behind the firing line at competitions or at training. These are situations where the rifle scope won't allow you to accomplish the same goals. So if you're starting out and you are on a limited budget, I suggest rolling your spotting scope money into a higher class of optic on your rifle scope. You'll just get more mileage out of that than you would out of a cheap spotting scope and a mid-range optic. On YouTube, WH17753ND asks, thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. Please keep up the good work. I have a question about rifle chamberings. I've read that there's a slight difference between the military 7.62 NATO and the civilian 308 Winchester, and for that matter, 5.56 NATO and 223 Remington. Is this true? If it is, can you discuss how this affects accuracy and safety, i.e. is the ammo 100% cross-compatible? Well, the ammo is not 100% cross-compatible, and the reason being is there are dimensional differences between 223 and 5.56, as well as 7.62 and 308. Now, I'm not really going to talk much about the 223 5.56. That's been done ad nauseum on. That's been done pretty in depth on AR15.com and several of the other gun boards. You can just search 5.56 versus 223 out there and get piles and piles and piles of search results. What I will touch on, though, is the lesser discussed 7.62 versus 308 discussion. Now, when you really get down to it, what you want to do is you want to look at the either the headspace gauges or the chamber design for each of those cartridges. On the 7.62 NATO chambering, there is a little bit more headspace room. The cartridge, or I'm sorry, the chamber is just a little bit longer than 308 Winchester. What that basically means is that you can fire 308 Winchester rounds in a 7.62 chamber pretty much across the board. You may have trouble chambering some 7.62 surplus cartridges in a matched 308 chamber. Just because in matched chambers they tend to run that headspace down just a little bit tighter, and you may have trouble getting it in and locking that bolt down. There are debates on the pressure levels. Some people say that the pressure level on the 7.62 NATO is lower than the pressure level on 308 Winchester cartridges. There are people out there that will tell you not to fire high pressure 308 in an old military 7.62 rifle. I think that we've gotten far enough away from that now that it's really going to be a case-by-case basis. You're going to want to look at the rounds, at the specific loadings, and make your own determination on if the pressure levels are going to be good for an old military rifle or not. There are some current commercial chamberings loadings for 308 out there that I most definitely would not fire in an old military rifle. For instance, the Hornady Superformance 308. They loaded that fairly hot, and we've popped primers on it in modern rifles chambered for 308. Now, when you get into civilian rifles, just because it says 308 or 7.62 on the side of the barrel doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a dimensional difference going one way or the other in the chamber. A good example of that is my Accuracy International actually has printed on the side of the barrel that it's 7.62 by 51. If you compare that to one of our factory Remington 700s chambered in 308 Winchester, take a fired piece of brass from both those rifles, you'll notice that the brass from the Accuracy International will actually gauge smaller than the fired brass from the 700. I can take ammo that is neck sized for the Accuracy International and chamber it and fire in the Remington, but I cannot do the opposite because the cases are too large when they come out of the Remington. That tells me that the 308 Winchester chamber in the Remington is longer than the chamber in the Accuracy International. Now, I could usually just chalk that up to manufacturing variance, but it holds true with every factory 308 Remington that I've had through here. They tend to have a little bit longer chambers than some of the other 308 rifles that I've had. So it's not really a rule. It's something more you want to look at case by case. Now, if you're looking at headspace gauges, a military 7.62 headspace gauge is going to be longer than a SAAMI 308 Winchester headspace gauge. And we'll go ahead and throw the measurements up and link to the website where I got some of that information down in the comments section. So what you need to know for the practical use of it is if you have some surplus ammunition that you're looking at running in a 308 bolt gun or any 308 rifle, get a small quantity of it and chamber check it. If it chambers, you're probably going to be just fine firing it. If it doesn't chamber, obviously it's going to be pretty useless for you. So don't go buy a whole case of ammo and then hope that it will chamber in your gun. Try it out first. And again, if you have an old 308, or I'm sorry, an old 7.62 NATO military rifle, Make sure that the commercial ammo that you're trying to fire through it is not going to damage the weapon. Ford VG asks, "Great video, John. My question is the difference between MOA, MILRAD, or MILS. Being an older fart, some of the new things I have not got a chance to see how it works. John, I have been a hand loader now for 24 years too. Keep up the great videos and Semper Fi from an old devil dog." Well, Ford, Semper Fi. The difference between MOA, which is minute of angle, and MRADs, which is mil radians, is MOA, minute of angle, is roughly equivalent, well, it's not roughly equivalent to, it is equivalent to 1.04 inches at 100 yards. So if you move a perfectly accurate scope turret 1 MOA, then it will move the impact to your round 1.047 inches at 100 yards. 1 milradian, if you take that same perfectly accurate scope and you turn the turret 1 milradian, it'll move the impact of the round 3.6 inches at 100 yards. Now those are pretty much set in stone. They're units, they're angular units of measure, and they are what they are. Do not confuse minutes of angle with inches per 100 yards. Very often guys will just ballpark round MOA, minute of angle, to 1 inch at 100 yards. There are some times that that's acceptable and that will give you acceptable results. There are some times that it will not. Remember, when we're working with long range precision, then your errors are going to compound at longer ranges. Now that 1.047 inches at 100 yards turns out to 10.47 inches at 1,000 yards. So guys are quick to dismiss that 0.47 inches, saying, well, you can't hold within half an inch at 1,000 yards. Well, I know I'm not capable of holding a group within half an inch at 1,000 yards. But what you have to think is how many clicks or how many minutes of angle is it going to take you to dial on your elevation to impact at 1,000 yards. Now you take that half-inch difference and multiply it by the number of minutes of angle you had to dial in to hit there, and you end up with several inches of difference. Now when you're trying to hit a 1.5-minute target, which is, a 15-inch target at 1,000 yards, then inches add up quickly, and you can very quickly end up being off the target if you're incorrectly estimating. So don't forget that little 0.47 or that 0.47 on the end there. That will turn around and bite you in the butt. Now, I don't like to get into which is better, minutes of angle or milradians, because honestly, it's not about which one is better, it's about which one you can more accurately work with. I prefer milradians. Most of my scopes are mil reticles and 1/10 mil adjustments on the turret. That allows me to work quickly with the formulas that I've memorized and with the dope that I've memorized for the primary rifle I use. Now, I could just as easily switch over to minute of angle if I was working with a scope with a minute of angle reticle and minute of angle turrets. Now, the key there is you have to make sure that the reticle and the turrets are true minute of angle, that somebody didn't get funny and decide to round to make things easier or change things up on you. That does happen. Every now and again you'll get a scope that's actually inch per 100 yards and they label it as minute of angle or vice versa. So you want to make sure you test that stuff and you keep those kind of things in mind. Now, as I said, I prefer minutes of angle, or I'm sorry, I prefer milradians, but if you like minutes of angle, go for it. One thing I do want to point out is mils are not metric. People think mils are metric. I hear it all the time. There are some scope manufacturers out there that even mark their turrets as metric when they're really mil turrets. Just because a mil works out to 1 centimeter at 100 meters doesn't make it a metric turret. It also ends up being 1 yard at 1,000 yards. That doesn't make it a yards turret. So it's 1/1000th of the distance that you're working with. That's the best way to think about it, and allows you to work within whatever system that you're comfortable with either metric or English. If you are a new shooter just starting out, I highly suggest that you go with a mil reticle and mil turrets. As you go along, you'll find that there are more options out there for reticle styles in mil reticles. There are more and more manufacturers that are offering mil scopes out there. Also, if you get on a firing line and you end up next to a guy that's got a spot for you, there's a really good chance that he's going to have a mil reticle in his scope. Even if you're going to say a law enforcement school, the vast majority of shooters on the line are going to have mil reticles. There will be a few holdouts out there with MOA reticles, but the vast majority will be mil. So it gets a little bit easier if you're tossed into the mix with other shooters. RTR on Sniper Side asks, what's your preferred placement and technique for strong hand grip on an AI stock? Well, RTR, you actually caught me at a point where I do not have a standard thumb hole AI stock at my disposal right now. We have recently switched our AE Mark II over to the new FDE Viper skins. We just got these in with the new grippy cheek piece and the larger pistol grip. But my hand placement pretty much stays the same regardless if we're running the pistol grip Viper skins or the standard thumb hole AI stock. And what I do, of course this rifle is clear right now, no ammunition in it, no ammunition here at the table. What I do is start from my trigger finger, place my trigger finger on the trigger in a nice 90-degree angle, and that puts my palm roughly where the pistol grip on the AI stock is. I then just bring my fingers back, curl them back to find the mold line down the front of the grip and just sit my fingertips on the mold line. I then will do either one of two things. Either I'll hook my thumb back behind the grip and then drop my trigger finger on the trigger, or I can float my thumb up here on the side. The Viper skins have a little indent on the side. The standard AI stock doesn't. It's just got that regular 90-degree corner there. It's more comfortable to float your thumb on a set of Viper skins than it is on the factory AI stock. So I usually hook my thumb around on the factory stock. That's pretty much it. I have a fairly loose grip on the AI stocks. I don't really try to gorilla grip it. I've just got my hand wrapped around there, and the only purpose for my hand placement is really to support that trigger finger and where it's placed on there. Now, if your fingers are a different length than mine, that's going to alter your grip. However, getting that nice 90-degree trigger finger, placing it where it needs to be, and then building your grip based upon that is going to get your hand where it needs to be. Don't really worry about where your palm ends up at. You want to just make sure you've got the hand anchored with your other fingers and your thumb, so that when you're moving that trigger finger, that's the only thing that's moving. You don't want to get any squeezing going on or anything sliding around when you decide to press that trigger. We'll do some close-ups and go a little bit more in-depth on that here shortly when we get towards the end of the Budget Precision series. When we wrap that up, we're going to go into some skills series showing you actually how to utilize that rifle to its utmost potential. Desert Rat 1979 asks, could you touch more on the set height of a bipod when shooting prone? I ask because I know that getting as low as possible is the desired result, but I need to go about half the leg extension or I just get tension and pain in my neck and shoulders. I'm average in size, 5'11", 175. It seems if I get too low, aside from the pain, it creates a dip that induces muzzle hop. Raising it puts me more square behind the rifle and the hop goes away. Am I dwelling too much on this, or am I just not doing right with the legs retracted? Also, Shooterman017 asked a similar question. Can you elaborate on shooting position height? I know as low as possible is the idea, but what happens when you start getting too low? How can this impact your shooting? Well, basically what we want to start out with when we're setting up our rifle is we want to get proper shoulder placement. We want to get that buttstock in the pocket of the shoulder. Then we want to get our cheek set in the proper cheek weld on the comb of the stock. We want to be in a comfortable position that places our eye directly behind the scope. We don't want to have our head cranked over one side or the other side. We don't want to have to crane our neck up or down to get on the scope. The key is you want to be fairly comfortable on the rifle. Now this confuses a lot of new shooters because if you're not used to laying down behind a rifle, the first couple of times you do it, it's not going to be entirely comfortable. You are going to end up with some neck strain, and those muscles have to get used to the position that you're in. This is the same thing for any new activity that causes your body to be put into positions it's not used to. It won't be entirely comfortable at first, but as you train yourself through it, then you'll find the position is more and more comfortable. If it's not, then you need to change something up to get a little bit better position. If you find you're cranking your head to one side or the other, then you're going to need to raise or lower the stock in your shoulder to accommodate that. Once you get your basis on where the stock needs to be in your shoulder and how your face needs to be on the comb to get a proper sight picture through the scope, that's going to dictate where your bipod needs to be to get those crosshairs on target. Now, if you're cramming yourself way down to the ground, then it's going to strain your neck back a little bit. So you may need to raise the rifle up a little bit. If you're in a situation where having the bipod legs extended halfway is giving you a comfortable position and you're able to stay straight behind the rifle and minimize that hop when the rifle fires, then that's going to be good to go. If you're a little bit higher than the next guy, it's no big deal. All of our body shapes are just a little bit different. If you can get lower, lower is better, especially for a military or law enforcement shooter where there may be bullets coming back at you. Low is your friend because you may have to utilize micro-terrain as cover. We teach in military shooting to even flatten out your feet so your instep is pressed against the ground, because when you start getting those heels up, it's possible due to the terrain to have your heels a little bit higher in your head. That's not a good thing. So if possible, lower is better. However, lower should not be the goal, and you should not sacrifice your comfort or where you're placing the rifle in your shoulder to get lower. So it's kind of a give or take. This is one of those places where having a professional shooting coach to actually look at your position and help you adjust may be a really good thing. These kind of videos, me talking to you, is definitely not a replacement for professional training. So if you have the ability to do so, go ahead and seek professional training or seek an experienced coach who can help you dial your position in. Our Precision asks, how do you practice unknown distance shooting? How do you practice ranging? These two skills, while synonymous, seem to degrade quickly when not used regularly. Add in angles, wind, and other conditions, long-range precision shooting skills remain difficult to maintain, let alone hone. Well, this is a problem for all of us that don't live in a place where we can shoot off of our back porch. Sometimes we end up having a couple of weeks go by when we can get to the range to practice our skill. So there are several different systems out there that will assist you in that. There's a video game for the computer out there. I shouldn't say video game, it's actually a shooting simulation for the computer called Shooter Ready. We'll put the link down in the comments section below or down in the description below. It's a extremely good piece of software for practicing range estimation utilizing your reticle. I found that the wind holds on it, they can be a hit or miss kind of thing. But then again, we don't get perfect winds out in the real world. So I don't think it's a really good thing to use to hone your wind reading skills. But for the range estimation portion of it, utilizing the reticle and a mill relation formula, it's an excellent piece of software. That, and it's just fun, it'll keep you involved. For real-world training, Impact Data Books has a system called the RETS, which is basically a set of targets that have incremental sizes to them, and those correspond to the training sheets that they give you. You don't have to set them out at specific distances. It's just simply the size of the target versus your correction factor then allows you to basically mill the target out without being able to cheat. It's an extremely good system. I actually used it in one of our competition stages at the Oregon Sniper Challenge last year. And while I bombed that stage because I was rushing for time, it's a very, very good system. We hope to be able to do a little bit more information on that later, but head over to Impact Data Book's page and check that out as soon as the video is over. And it may be a really good option for you to do some backyard training. Beyond that, my training system is just basically lots and lots and lots of dry fire. When I can't get to the range, I get down behind the gun and dry fire. I don't personally practice range estimation a whole lot because it's been drilled into my head for so long. The time when I really need to get behind a scope and start messing with range estimation is when I switch reticles. If I change to a different reticle, then I need to get down and get the reticle burned into my brain so I know where the subtensions are and how thick each of the lines in each of the sections of the reticle are. But rets and shooter ready are a great way to train yourself when you can't actually get to the range. On Twitter, Michael Gibbons asks, "Thanks for featuring my question. Got another one, RE Parallax. I've been reading but still don't quite get it." Well, Michael, parallax is one of those things that's often misunderstood. The best way that I can describe it is if you pick out a spot on a far wall to look at, and you hold your finger up and place it over the spot on the wall. If you hold your finger still and you move your head from side to side, you'll notice that your finger moves in relation to that spot on the wall. That's parallax. Your finger, which would be the reticle, and the spot on the wall, which would be the target, are not in the same focal plane. So moving your head slightly from either side will cause the reticle to move on the target. This is obviously a problem for us because we use the reticle as our aiming point. We believe the bullet's going to go where the reticle's placed. When you adjust the parallax on a rifle scope, what you're attempting to do is bring the target focal plane and the reticle focal plane together so that they move as one when you move your head around behind the scope. Now, a lot of people misunderstand this. This is not focus. We're not talking about focus. We're simply talking about parallax. Some of the optical systems out there, it is possible to dial it down to where it's parallax free, but still not have the target in perfect focus. The way I will adjust parallax when I'm down behind a target is I'll get on the rifle, I'll dial the parallax knob until I get as clean a sight picture as I can get on the target end. Then I'll lift my cheek up off the stock and I'll move my head around slightly behind the scope without moving the rifle. I'll watch to make sure that the reticle is planted on the target and not moving in relation to the target. If it is moving, then I'll adjust either the parallax knob or my adjustable objective until the reticle is anchored to the target. Now, when I finish that, the target may now be just slightly out of focus, and if it is, then so be it. We don't really mind if the target is slightly out of focus as long as it's parallax free. A parallax free sight picture will give you your most accurate shot. Imagination asks, "Awesome MCM as usual. Looking for a rifle backpack. Are there any that you highly recommend?" Well, we've actually contacted Eberly Stock. We talked to them at SHOT Show, and we hope to have one of their low drag X3 backpacks on the way in. I've looked at a couple of different Eberly Stock products, and they appear to be very highly regarded. You see a lot of them on the firing line in some of the tactical competitions. SOTEC also has a rifle scabbard type backpack coming out that will be worth a look. But as of right now, I don't have any that I've used. Operationally, I've always just slung my rifle and carried a backpack. It's worked okay. It's a huge pain in the butt. So if you have a situation where you have to climb or you have to go hands-free or you have to operate a secondary weapon system like a carbine, you definitely want to check into one of the scabbard type backpacks. The X3s are back ordered right now. As soon as we end up getting one in, we'll go ahead and do a review video on it, and we'll get the information out to you guys. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of Mail Call Mondays. As always, thanks for your questions. If you've got any questions for us, please post them in the comments section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. We will pick through the questions and select the best ones and answer them the following week. If you guys are checking out the Viper skins on our Accuracy International AE Mark II here, we've got two editions that we stuck on here. We've got the grippy cheek piece up here. If you guys have been having problems with your cheek sliding around on the factory smooth AI cheek piece, The grippy cheek piece for the AW or the AE or the AICS works great. It's got the same kind of finish as a Hogue overmolded stock, and it really allows you to get a nice cheek weld on it. We've also got the XL grips for the Viper skins on this model. We'll be doing a full review of those later. If you're not a subscriber, go ahead and hit the subscription button. As soon as we do new review videos, YouTube will let you know. It's free and it helps us out. Thanks for pushing our views up. You guys are doing a great job of getting the word out, but don't stop now. Please keep it up. Post these videos up wherever you happen to be, on whatever forums you happen to venture on, and spread the word. The more views that we get, the more comments that we get, and especially the more like button hits that we get, the higher our rankings rise and the more videos we're going to be able to bring to you. So thank you guys for your support so far, and keep it up. Till next weekend, thanks.